Fire was not an accident in medieval towns. It was a condition of life. Urban space was built around flame long before it was built around safety. Heat, light, cooking, craft, and survival all depended on open fire. Every household maintained it daily. Every workshop relied on it constantly. Flame was not a threat kept at a distance. It was embedded into walls, floors, and routines. Most towns were made of materials that invited burning. Wood dominated construction because it was available, cheap, and fast to use. Beams, floors, roofs, stairs, and partitions were all flammable. Even stone structures relied on wooden supports, wooden interiors, and wooden roofing. Fire did not need a weak point. The entire town was one. Buildings stood close together, often touching. Streets were narrow, irregular, and crowded. This was not poor planning. It was efficiency. Density reduced travel time, protected against attack, and concentrated economic activity. But it also allowed fire to move faster than people could respond. Once a flame crossed a roof line, distance no longer mattered. Roofs were especially dangerous. Thatched or shingled, dry in summer and brittle in cold, they turned sparks into spread. A single ember carried by wind could ignite an entire block. Chimneys were primitive or absent. Smoke escaped wherever it could, often through gaps that also released sparks. Inside homes, fire was rarely contained. Open hearths burned day and night. Cooking, heating, and light shared the same source. Sparks fell on the floors. Ash accumulated. Children, animals, and tools moved constantly around flame. Accidents were not rare events. They were expected interruptions. Work multiplied the risk. Bakers, brewers, metalworkers, tanners, and dyers all used high heat. Workshops operated inside residential areas. There was no separation between living space and production. Fire meant income, and income could not be relocated for safety. Towns accepted danger as the price of function. Storage made things worse. Homes and shops were filled with fuel. Wood, straw, cloth, oil, resin, and dried goods were stacked wherever space allowed. Nothing was isolated. Everything fed flame. When fire started, it did not spread gradually. It accelerated. Water access was limited and unreliable. Wells were few. Buckets were small. Organized firefighting did not exist in the modern sense. Response depended on neighbors noticing early, reacting together, and not panicking. At night, detection came late. By the time bells rang, the fire had already grown beyond control. Wind turned fire into movement. Medieval towns were exposed. Strong drafts flowed through narrow streets and over rooftops. Fire followed these paths naturally. Efforts to stop it often failed because people fought the visible flames, not the invisible air that carried them. Fear shaped response. When fire broke out, people did not focus on saving structures. They focused on saving lives and possessions. Panic led to congestion. Streets clogged with carts, animals, and bodies. Escape routes collapsed into chaos, feeding the fire with obstruction and delay. Authority had limited control. Rules against open flames, night baking, or unsafe storage existed, but enforcement was weak. Survival needs outweighed regulation. People broke rules because they had to. Cold, hunger, and labor did not pause for safety. Fire became a recurring trauma. Towns burned, rebuilt, and burned again. Memory adjusted. Destruction was normalized. Loss became expected. People lived knowing that everything they owned could vanish overnight. This awareness shaped behavior. Homes were temporary by assumption. Wealth was kept movable when possible. Emotional attachment to buildings was limited. Stability was psychological, not physical. By living inside constant risk, medieval towns accepted fire as part of their structure. Not as a failure of planning, but as the cost of density, labor, and survival. And once flame appeared, the town itself helped it grow. Once a fire began, it rarely stayed local. The town itself carried it forward. Flames moved faster than coordination. People relied on shouting, bells, and sight, but fire did not wait for recognition. By the time danger was understood, roofs were already burning, and walls were radiating heat. Fighting the fire meant standing close to it, and that exposed bodies to smoke, collapse, and panic. There was no clear boundary between rescue and escape. Saving a home often meant risking death. Many chose to flee instead. This decision was rational. A burned house could be rebuilt. A burned body could not. As more people fled, fewer remained to slow the spread. Fire gained space as human resistance withdrew. Collapse multiplied destruction. When one building failed, it pulled others with it. Shared walls transferred heat. Falling beams carried flame into neighboring interiors. What began as a contained blaze became a chain reaction of structural failure. Towns were not designed to burn in isolation. They burned as systems. Night intensified loss. Darkness delayed response and amplified fear. Fire illuminated the town unevenly, creating pockets of blindness and confusion. Shadows hid danger. Smoke disoriented movement. People stumbled, shouted, collided. Order dissolved quickly. Animals added chaos. Livestock trapped inside buildings panicked, broke restraints, and ran through streets. Sparks followed them. Fire spread unpredictably, driven not just by wind but by fear in motion. After the flames passed, the damage extended beyond ash. Wells were contaminated. Tools were destroyed. Food stores vanished. Even those whose homes survived faced hunger and displacement. Fire did not end when the flames died. It continued through scarcity. Rebuilding repeated the same conditions. People rebuilt quickly, using the same materials in the same dense patterns. They had little choice. Space was limited. Resources were scarce. Urgency overrode caution. Fire memory did not change necessity. This repetition shaped collective psychology. Towns lived with expectation of loss. Preparation focused on recovery, not prevention. People learned to replace rather than protect. Emotional resilience mattered more than structural safety. Authority adapted to inevitability. Rather than eliminating fire, rules tried to manage aftermath. Responsibility shifted to individuals. Blame followed survivors instead of systems. Fire was treated as misfortune, not design failure. Over time, fire became integrated into identity. Stories, rituals, and warnings centered on it. Children grew up hearing about past burns and future ones. Flame was not an abstract danger. It was familiar, recurring, and accepted. This acceptance reduced urgency for change. When disaster is expected, resistance weakens. People endure rather than reform. Survival becomes cyclical instead of progressive. Medieval towns burned because they were built to function under pressure, not to last without loss. They prioritized closeness, labor, and speed over safety. Fire was the consequence of those priorities, not a deviation from them. Every hearth that fed life also fed risk. Every workshop that produced wealth produced danger. Every narrow street that protected the town trapped it. Fire did not arrive from outside. It emerged from within daily routine. And as long as survival depended on flame, towns accepted burning as part of living. Not because they ignored danger, but because removing it meant dismantling the life they depended on. In medieval towns, fire was not an enemy waiting beyond the walls. It lived inside them, patiently,